Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Today, we will discuss about industrial design infringement, which forms a very important component of any course on intellectual property. Many of you may have heard of the term industrial design, which is a very core of many of the new product development activities. Industrial design is primarily concerned with developing products, services, and systems where we add a value through aesthetics by assessing the manufacturability, by assessing the functionality of a product, by assessing usability of a product. So, industrial designers form a very important component in any new product development, and they add a value through aesthetics, usability, manufacturability, and in terms of functionality. Now, what we are going to discuss today is to have just a brief on industrial design, followed by what is industrial design infringement, and we'll also study some of the examples as we go along this particular course. Now, like any other intellectual property which you have already studied, you have studied about probably the trademarks, the copyrights, and the patents. Industrial design is also prone to infringement. And particularly the organizations which are in the business of design of products in terms of, let's say, a furniture design, or it may be a textile design, or any of the product or service design, generally go through a very rigorous industrial design process to add a value to products and services. And this happens over a period of time where people spend large amount of time, large manpower, and also substantial money to come up with industrial designs which are really appealing, which are aesthetic, which have a strong usability, and in the process they would like to actually build a brand for their own organizations. And when industrial design process goes through a rigorous time and money involvement, it's always important to protect the value which has been added as a design. And we all know that the design protection is actually governed by the Designs Act 2000, which Government of India came up some time back. And most of the protection to infringement related issues are discussed in this particular act, and it's good for every student to actually go through this act and probably get familiar, so that one understands what design registration and design infringement is all about. And anybody who owns a design registration can then probably protect and also probably file a suit in case any other individual or organizations basically infringes on the protected design by an organization or an individual. So, that is what actually constitutes most of the industrial design infringement which we are actually discussing today. And we will also take some of the examples and we will also analyze some of the situations where the infringement happens and how to deal with such situations. I would actually like to basically give a little brief about what is an inclusive and exclusive aspects of industrial design, which is actually can be protected and infringed, because that's a very important to understand this subject as a whole. So, as per the design acts, the design is generally defined as basically consisting of features of shape, configuration, pattern, ornament or a composition, or lines or color patterns applied to any article, with whatever may be the mode of manufacturing, whatever may be the material which is used to make it. But it's usually judged not by its functionality, but by its appearance, solely by the eye. And hence, the visual aspect of a product becomes a very key whenever we actually protect, or let's say use a design as a value addition for any of the product. And when it comes to, just to give an example, shape is a very important aspect of an industrial design. Now, usually industrial designers arrive at a shape, a specific shape, because of multiple reasons. One reason could be that it's aesthetically pleasing, it's very elegant in terms of its shape, or it may be because usability of a product, for example, the ergonomics, the human factors sometimes dictate the shape of an object, and the process of arriving at a specific shape also goes through a multiple iterations. Usually industrial designers do ideations and explore multiple shapes before they finalize one, or before they finalize one particular form. And since this is a process which takes considerable time and goes through a kind of an optimization, so shape becomes a very important aspect of any industrial design, and it constitutes a core of design registration when it is actually protected. Similarly, configuration is another very important aspect. Usually a product can have a single component, or it may have a multiple components or multiple elements. And whenever it consists of multiple elements, it's also important that how these elements are arranged and what is the kind of configuration the product has, and how to basically what is the optimum configuration which one is looking at, all becomes a very important aspect of an industrial design. Similarly, the pattern, ornamental aspect also form a very important aspect of any industrial design. Why I am trying to bring this particular aspect is that to emphasize that industrial design is a value adding process, and the value which comes out of multiple iterations and multiple ideations is actually is the one which is really protected, and that's what constitutes core of industrial design. However, not everything in the design cannot be protected. For example, as we said in earlier, that the appearance or aesthetic of a product is a very important aspect for design, but the process to arrive at that may not be. For example, let's say an organization or an individual comes up with a particular product which is aesthetically pleasing. Another organizations which may probably uses the same shape or same form or a same color, but arrives through a very different, let's say, manufacturing process, does not actually constitute for design. In other words, if you really look at design as an intellectual property, it is the end result which is actually more important than the process itself. For example, there may be two products which are looking identical in terms of colors, in terms of form, etc., but they may have a very different functionality, or they may have a very different, you can say, a functional processes does not actually constitute for a design or a design registration. And design registrations are also done because when you actually hear about a design registration, one of the first confusion which comes to people's mind is that, is it same as, let's say, a copyright, or is it same as let's say a trademark? Usually it is not. So in fact, when somebody goes to file a design registration, you first eliminate what is possible through a trademark or a copyright, and what actually cannot be done through these. Usually goes for a design in many of the cases. So, in other words, elimination of other forms of intellectual property is also a kind of a precursor for filing a design. And a design can be a two-dimensional or it can be a three-dimensional artifact. Both qualify for a design process. There are certain things which cannot be considered as a design or they do not qualify for a design registration. For example, let's say I have a design which has no novelty, which is not a original, which is a design or a form or a color being used very regularly and is in use for many years or decades or centuries, do not actually constitute for filing an industrial design. So, a novelty or a originality is a very important aspect, because these things are very important, because when an infringement is evaluated, the novelty and the originality becomes a very important element to basically look at. Is something one has to always keep in mind. And also a lot of things, particularly where there are certain type of publications uh, do not constitute for a design. Many of them actually go into a copyright. So usually most of the design or design registrations constitute more in the form of 2D or a 3D artifacts in the form of color, form, appearance and pattern is something which is very central to that. But one thing which is very important for design registration is that if I have an infringement, or if there is something, if I am actually protecting a particular design, I should ensure that this is clearly distinguishable from other forms of existing design, and there is a real value added to this particular design in the form of either a form or a color is a very important aspect. If it does not, then probably it will not actually qualify for a design registration. So, one of the important aspects for somebody who is actually looking at design protection and design infringement is one has to ensure that the design which is protected is clearly distinguishable from the existing forms and existing artifacts is a very central to that. Unless there is a distinguishable aspect of a new design which is protected, it actually does not qualify for a design, and hence often industrial designers look for certain forms, patterns, colors and configurations which are very unique, which probably will help them to arrive at a unique design which cannot be copied, or which probably will add a unique value and a brand to the organizations. Now, why we are discussing these aspects or revising is that some of these aspects of design protection and registration is very central to discuss the infringement which we are discussing today. Now, coming to, in case of let's say an infringement basically consists of somebody using an already existing design, or let's say already protected design for their own purpose. And when this infringement happens, how does one evaluate whether the infringement has really happened or not, or how does one actually challenge this in a court of law, and how does the court actually decides whether there is an infringement? There are certain very basic elements which are very important to know. One thing is ki, if design is not protected, then there is no case of infringement. I may be using my own design for many centuries, but I never applied for a design registration. And if somebody, let's say, infringes or copies, I don't have any right to challenge because I have not protected it. So, protecting a design is a very fundamental to infringement. And whenever infringement happens, one aspect which is very clearly evaluated is similarity between two designs. Now, the moment I say the word similarity, similarity itself is a very subjective, and hence you will also see that in many of the past cases of infringement, how this similarity has been evaluated very subjectively, and that becomes a very important. So, in other words, if designers can actually bring some aspect of, let's say, an element of their design which is very unique, and if they are able to claim that uniqueness and novelty as a part of a design, then it actually becomes a more important qualification, or you can say the protection becomes much easier and the infringement becomes less obvious. Also, it's important that how an average person actually perceives a design is a very important. In case of two designs from, let's say, two different individuals or organizations has to be compared, if an average person has a belief that these are the same, or if they confuse or if they expect one for the other, that means ki there is a lot of similarity, and that similarity is from the average person's perspective is often used in order to basically evaluate design infringement in most of the court of law. And also, as we discussed, that more from the consumer's mind, when a product which is in, let's say, there is a design which is infringed, and if the consumer has a confusion about the two products, let's say assuming one for the other, then that is a very clear case of industrial design infringement. And once we know ki what are the things where the infringement or how the infringement is evaluated, it not only helps to avoid the infringement, but it also helps a lot of industrial designers to bring those unique value such that this clause of similarity and the clause of distinguishability is generally taken care as a part of a design itself, leaving basically no confusion either for the user or a consumer. So, in that way, industrial design infringement qualification is a very important topic in this particular subject. To understand the design infringement, let's take a few situations and a few examples to understand the concept of infringement more clearly. And often the examples give a much clarity to the subject of design infringement than the discussion itself. Let's take there are two organizations. Let's say there is an organization or an individual A which manufactures, let's say, products such as coffee mug in ceramic material, and there is a case of infringement by another individual or organizations, let's say a B, and now one has to evaluate, is this a case of infringement, whether B is infringing on A's design, you can say design property or not, can be evaluated. There can be a multiple situations, and let's take these situations one by one and let's evaluate. Take situation 1. Situation 1 says ki it's not a case of infringement because the one who is actually the claiming the property or a design has not actually filed for a design registration. I think this we discussed earlier also. If I have not filed for a design registration, I cannot challenge for an infringement. So that's a first situation which is there. Situation 2 is that there is a case of infringement, and an infringement is actually filed, but the case is that before the design registration was filed, the design has been displayed or disclosed multiple times and multiple occasions, and hence it became a public property. So, though design registration is filed, which is not probably awarded, but since it has been displayed and it has already been disclosed, so it does not qualify for a case of an infringement, and the infringer is actually free to use this design because it has been made public before the protection. So, that is a situation 2. Situation 2 is that a case of infringement where A has registered as a design and B uses the same design for commercial purpose without obtaining a permission from A. So, in case the permission has been obtained, often the written permission from somebody who owns the design, this is still called as an infringement. In case a permission has been obtained, then there is no case of an infringement, is a situation 3, because all these situations generally arise in a court of law, and it would be better to be familiar with each of these situations as we go along. The situation 4 is something where it's not a case of an infringement because the similarities between the design A and design B could not be established. In other words, there is a claim by an organization or individual design A that design B has infringed, but when the evaluation happens, the distinguishabilities and similarities cannot be established, hence it is actually not a case of an infringement. Situation 5 is another situation where infringement happens, and infringement actually happens because there is a real visual resemblance of, in other words, let us take organization B comes up with a new design which has a very high visual resemblance with that of a design A. In those situations, usually it qualifies for a basically infringement, and one can actually ask for the damages in this situation, particularly when the visual resemblances are very high and it is very difficult to distinguish between the two designs when they were presented either physically or digitally, is a very clear case of a infringement. Similarly, there is a situation 6 where it's the product is actually maybe very different, but I think the same trademark has been put of the design A and design B. It does not qualify for a design infringement, but it does qualify for an infringement of a very different kind, and hence it is not included as a part of the design infringement. Let us take another very important situation, situation 7, where the organization B infringes on organization A of copying a specific design of a coffee mug. In this case, the claim is that the color of the product of organization B is very different, though the form is same, hence it is not an infringement. But that is not true, because even if the color is different, as long as the form qualifies for infringement, it is still considered as an infringement, and in this case the damages need to be paid in case the organization A seeks damages from the organization B. So, there are various such situations which generally arise in any infringement case, and knowing this probably will help both designer as well as the organization leadership to basically prepare for both protection as well as for the leadership. Let us take two real world examples just to conclude this particular session. So, one of the very classic case which came some time back is an example of a dauber which actually manufactures basically a hair oil bottle and claimed that another organization has infringed and actually copied this hair oil bottle. And when this particular case actually went through court of law, uh, one of the things which came very strikingly is that though there has been lot of similarities between the two bottles, one of plaintiff and another of the one who has basically alleged to be an infringer, but it was actually it was given in favor of uh, basically the organization, second organization which used this particular design, because in the case of Dabur, they actually filed a design registration for a bottle as a whole without actually specifically mentioning the specific novelties in terms of the form and other aspects. Since the novelty and the specificity and the distinguishability did not come out clearly in claims, this was actually did not go in their favor, and it was actually given in favor of Rajesh Kumar, who was actually the other party, which actually was a case, very interesting case which came through a few years back. So let me take another very interesting case which came very recently, where Cello Household Products filed a case against Modeware India about copying the design of a water bottle. And you can see that the two water bottles, which are actually by one by Cello House and another by Modeware, both are shown here. It's very difficult to even distinguish which belongs to a which organization. And in this case, the basically one of the ruling which was given, since it has a large number of similarities, uh, both for overall appearance as well as a very specific features of a product, the case was given in favor of Cello House, and because of which the Modeware India was asked to basically stop their production, and also it was declared as a case of an infringement to pay damages to the Cello House. So this is another very clear example. So if you really look at the two cases, two examples which we discussed, example 1 and example 2, they had lot of similarities in terms of the infringement cases, but in the case of the first one, the infringement could not be established because there were no specific novelty claims which were mentioned in the design, whereas in the case of the Cello, there were very specific features of the product or features of a design which were registered were infringed, and hence the case went in favor of the plaintiff. So there can be a number of such examples. I hope this particular lecture gave you some idea about, or at least an orientation about, design infringement, which will be useful even for your understanding the future case studies. Thank you.